Episode 7 of The Rings of Power to this point is probably the biggest bummer to me, mainly because of how much of a decline it is from Episode 6 to Episode 7. And I don't mind them wanting to focus on developing the characters more emotionally and getting their arcs in a position to where they can kind of put them on the next step of their journey. However, it's just done so through a bunch of clunky writing and storytelling that just doesn't really live up to any type of scrutiny. A lot of it doesn't make a whole bunch of sense, and as you're watching it, you just kind of feel like, this doesn't make sense, and I feel like they could have done it much better. To this point, I've tried to be as fair as possible with this show, but I definitely have more critiques than praises for this particular episode, especially as we're getting so close to the season finale with only one more episode left. And so I do want to talk about all of these emotional moments that they wanted to set up and kind of how they don't live up to what I feel like the show wants it to live up to and how they fall flat from my perspective. And this is the type of thing that is good to have in television, and this might work for some people, but for me, as I looked at the various different story elements that were going on, I just kind of thought this probably shouldn't have happened this way. Starting with Theo and Galadriel at the beginning of the episode, they meet up, and they kind of wander off into the wilderness for who knows why? Why did they not try and help more people in the village? Why did Galadriel not try and find Bronwyn or Arondir, people who Theo was connected with? Why didn't Theo mention that he wants to find his mother? These are things that are kind of interesting, and that's because the show wants to take these two on this journey together. Basically, so that Galadriel can use Theo as a soundboard for her own character development and her own changes she's going through. And those wise words are going to be what then develops Theo into whatever leader character he's going to be on down the road in the show. But because of this lack of logic within the story, it kind of robs the reunion moment that Theo, Bronwyn, and Arondir have when they all meet up. We're supposed to emotionally feel glad that they were all able to get back together. However, me as a father kind of look at it and I'm a bit frustrated. Like, why weren't you looking for your kid? And why did you think this teenage boy post-volcanic eruption was just going to find his way back to this Númenórean encampment that he has no idea where it is because he was never there? And while I think that that moment falls pretty flat, I think that Galadriel being the focus of this perspective actually has some good stuff happening, being a little bit more humble, realizing that she's made some mistakes, even going as far as apologizing to the queen at the end of the episode for that. However, there's a huge distracting element that happens within this show, and that is when we find out about her husband, Celeborn. We find out that Celeborn went off to war and he never returned. She might presume that he is dead, missing, maybe because it's been so long, she just assumes he's dead. However, I feel like finding this out at this point within the show is one of those areas where, as a writer, you're intentionally withholding information because you want to have some type of twist at some point within the story, and this one just wasn't necessary. In fact, I feel like if you put Celeborn's missing nature or death or whatever it is within the show up front, then you have a much more sympathetic Galadriel. If from episode 1, maybe she believes that Celeborn is missing, everyone else believes he's dead, and if she can find Sauron, she feels like she will find her missing husband who never returned home from the war. Something like that to make her a more likable and sympathetic character, that when she kind of acts rash and irrational, we can kind of relate with her a little bit more because she's lost everything and she has some type of purpose in why she's doing what she's doing rather than just simple revenge. Miriel and Elendil are also focal characters within this particular setting of the show. Miriel loses her vision, and this is something that we're supposed to be saddened by. It's going to transform her character going forward. It's very unfortunate that it happened. However, it's one of those things that never should have happened, right? She's with Valinor and Isildur, and Isildur goes into a burning building to save a family that's stuck in there. And for some reason or another, the next person to go in is Miriel, when it definitely should not have been the queen. It should have been the other soldier, Valinor, to go in. So just logically, she should have never gone blind because she should have never been in that building. If the show followed any type of actual logic, that is probably the case that would have happened, but they needed her to go blind, so this is what they did. And then lastly, Elendil feeling like his son is lost, missing, or dead is definitely a sad thing, but there's just that shot at the end of the episode that kind of feels so odd. A bunch of people have talked about it. A bunch of people are going to continue to point it out. It's just a really poorly executed shot of him crying, and it just doesn't land. So when we have that sadness from Elendil, we as the audience know, because Isildur is who Isildur is, he's definitely not dead. So it's a little bit harder to resonate with that emotion because we know the good news already that he's definitely not dead, where Elendil doesn't, but we know it's all eventually gonna work itself out. And I think that basically covers it for the Southlands. I think the whole entire scenario of the Southlands in this episode is a bit of a mess, and none of the emotional moments really work for me there. It was kind of a bummer, and with that, I'm going to transition over to the Harfoots. I actually think the Harfoots in this episode are a bit better than they have been, but this scenario also had me scratching my head because the stranger is trying to help them by healing the trees. And in this scenario, he messes up. A branch falls on a little girl, one of the little Brandyfoot girls, and it puts two of the daughters in danger. And fortunately, nothing bad happened to them. But this makes the Harfoots kind of averse to having the stranger around. It's tough because they don't tell us whose idea it was, so this whole thing is a bit messy as it is, but you also don't really have Sadok Burrows trying to convince the stranger to stay. I feel like logic would lead these people to think that he's done a lot more good than harm at this point. He legitimately saved a group of people from dying from wolves just the last time we saw him on screen, and he's trying to help them heal these trees that have been burnt. I think maybe he deserves a little more slack and encouragement to stay. But because the show needs conflict, he ends up leaving. We have this scenario where the Harfoots are attacked by the Mystics. They have all of their food stores burnt up, and they decide that they are going to help out the stranger. And I actually think that this moment is a good character change within the Harfoots, having some of that hidden bravery that is within some of the hobbits within Tolkien's work. However, there's a line in here that really bothers me. Malva is the one who convinces Sadok to go ahead with Nori, Poppy, and Goldie on this journey to find the stranger because they are going to need someone who can lead them on the trail, some type of tracker, and he says to her, he just wishes she wasn't always right. And I'm thinking to myself that the last time we saw this woman speak to Sadok Burrows on screen, she was legitimately telling him to just leave the Brandyfoots behind, leave them for dead, keep going on with the journey, stop waiting for them. And that was just a bit silly to me. I kind of had to laugh a little bit that maybe we forgot that. And that leads me to our last scenario, which takes place in Khazad-Dum with Durin, Disa, Elrond, and older Durin. And this scenario all revolves around Prince Durin kind of duking it out with his father and deciding what is best for him to do, whether or not they should dig for the mithril and help the elves. And for me, this whole scenario around the elves and the elves fading away is just kind of clunky because of the fact that it's just not believable. We haven't seen any evidence of this happening. We're just kind of told it's going to happen, which kind of leads me to believe that this is false. This is a lie. Maybe this is something told by, Sauron whispering into the ear of some influential elf in a different part of Middle-earth. And I'm thinking it's probably not true, but who knows? But I feel like if they wanted the audience to really believe that, they would have given us a little bit more evidence than this blight. And the blight is another area where we have convenient storytelling that we find out in this instance after they've traveled all the way from Lindon to Khazad-Dum, which is many miles. They find out in the midst of a falling out that, hey, the mithril actually does work against this blight. They see the mithril actively heal the blight after Elrond's already walked away, and then Durin calls him back. It's one of those things that's just kind of really strange because you're thinking to yourself, well, Why didn't they try that when they had the mithril in Linden next to the blight tree? Because it's definitely something they could have tried, but didn't. You know, I understand that Elrond didn't want to tell Gil-galad that he had the mithril, but maybe he could have gone there in secret or something. It's just kind of one of those things that's a bit of a plot convenience. Or why didn't it heal the leaf before they got to Khazad-Dum? And it's because the story needed it to happen at that moment in time. But overall, I thought this was the best moment to kind of have Durin battle with his father and battle with his own ideologies of what he should be doing here, trying to decide to be faithful to his family or helping his friend. And to this point, I feel like Durin's been my favorite character to watch on screen. I feel like his character is in a pretty good spot within the show. Elrond and Disa are also really well executed, but I think Durin right now is definitely taking the spotlight of this show, proving that he's a decent character. However, even though I liked this scenario within the show the best, I still think overall there was very little momentum coming out of episode 7. They marketed it as this is where evil was going to reveal itself, making us think that, hey, maybe we'll find out something really good by the time we get to episode's end, and we really didn't. We are just kind of given a filler episode to kind of take the characters on an emotional journey, which is fine, but ultimately it didn't really land or satisfy me in any type of meaningful way. And maybe it worked for you, and if it did, please let me know in the comments down below. But to this point, I would say it's been my personal most disappointing episode. And if you guys want to continue to talk Rings of Power with me for the finale, be sure to subscribe to the channel. I'll have more fantasy related stuff coming in the future, and I look forward to talking to you guys next time on Parallel Quest. Bye-bye.